Hello everyone. Subscribe to the channel to get more videos. Also, let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. Now let's begin this one. That punch landed like nothing I'd ever thrown before. I didn't even realize I'd knocked the kid down until the gym went quiet. Just a second ago, we were bouncing around the ring, him throwing wild jabs, me ducking and weaving, trying to remember everything Greg had taught me about footwork. Then bam! My right fist connected with the side of his chin, and his knees buckled. I froze, staring down at him, my gloves still up like I was waiting for the ref to yell break or something. But no one said a word. Then Greg clapped once, loud enough to snap me back. "Don't break my gym, champ," he said, grinning, his lip bleeding from a cut he'd gotten earlier during drills. There was grease on his knuckles. He'd been elbow-deep in a busted washing machine not even an hour ago, mumbling about agitators and belts while I waited for sparring to start. I looked at him, then down at the kid still sitting on the mat, blinking like he couldn't believe what just happened. "Sorry," I mumbled, pulling my gloves off. Greg gave me a slap on the back. "Don't apologize. That's what you're here for." He handed me a towel, and I wiped the sweat off my face, still breathing hard. The other guys in the gym gave nods or muttered, "Good hit," before going back to their own training. It wasn't a big deal to them, probably just another Saturday sparring session. But for me, it felt huge. I was 13, barely over 100 pounds, and for once, I felt like I could actually hold my own. Greg walked over to the bench where he'd dropped his tool bag and grabbed a rag, wiping his hands absently. He looked tired. He always looked tired, but that grin he gave me when I landed that punch, that stayed with me. That night, the three of us sat down for dinner at home, me, Greg, and Mom. She'd made something quick, frozen lasagna or maybe leftovers. I don't even remember. What I do remember is the way she picked at her food, barely touching it, then pushed her plate away. "I'm not hungry," she said quietly. Greg didn't say anything, just reached over and turned the volume up on the TV a notch, like that might somehow drown out the silence. I stabbed at a piece of garlic bread on my plate and kept chewing. I didn't know it then, but that day, my first knockout, Greg's busted lip, Mom's untouched dinner, that was the last normal day we'd have together. Everything after that started to shift. Quiet at first, like a crack in a windshield you don't notice until it's already crawling all the way across. It was a Tuesday, early. I remember that because I'd just come home from school and was halfway through a bowl of cereal, still wearing my hoodie. The living room smelled like pine sol Mom must have cleaned, but the windows were still closed so it just sat heavy in the air. I had my phone in one hand, scrolling through dumb memes, not really paying attention to anything else. Then Greg walked in, keys jangling, boots heavy on the entryway tile. I didn't even look up. "Hey," he said, not loud, just regular. I grunted, still staring at my phone. A pause. Then, "Where's your mom?" I shrugged. "Dunno." That's when it got weird. Greg walked through the kitchen and stopped. He stood there for a long second, too long. Then I heard the clunk of something being set down. I turned just in time to see Mom step into view, already wearing her jacket, holding 2 overnight bags. Her face was blank, like she'd already said everything she needed to before he got home. "Liv," Greg said, his voice all the way soft. She didn't look at him. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He looked at the bags, then back at her. "Are you going somewhere?" "I'm leaving, Greg." He blinked. Just once. "Like, for a trip?" "I met someone," she said flatly. That was it. No explanation. No emotion. Like she was reciting a grocery list. Greg looked at me, confused, like I was going to jump up and yell, "Gotcha," and we'd all laugh about it later. But I didn't move. I just sat there with my cereal getting soggy, not saying a word. I could see the moment he realized I wasn't surprised. "You knew?" he asked. I didn't answer. Didn't even blink. "I'm not doing this," Mom said. "I'm not standing here and arguing. It's done." Greg didn't yell. He didn't beg. He didn't even ask who the guy was. He just stood there, staring at the woman he'd shared a home with for 13 years, like he was trying to remember how she ever looked at him like he mattered. Then, quietly, he stepped past her, down into the basement. I heard the heavy door creak open, then thump shut behind him. He didn't come back up for the rest of the night. I found out later he spent hours down there with that busted lamp he'd been trying to fix for months. Just tightening bolts that didn't need tightening. Staring at wires. Not doing anything, really, just staying busy so he wouldn't have to think. I didn't go down after him. Didn't text. Didn't knock. He was alone, and for the first time, I let him stay that way. A couple weeks passed. Maybe 3. Maybe 4. I honestly didn't keep track. Mom moved into a new apartment across town with her new boyfriend, Dylan. He had a Tesla, a giant beard, and one of those obnoxious laughs that made everyone in the room look over. I started staying at her place most nights, but it never felt right. She put up framed quotes about fresh starts and choosing joy. Dylan cooked vegan stir-fries and called me Bud. I just nodded and went to my room. Greg never reached out. He didn't call or text, but I kept seeing weird little things that reminded me he hadn't moved on. Not really. He still paid for the crunchy cereal I liked. I saw it once in a bag from the grocery store, peeking out next to his can of motor oil and duct tape. He still left the hallway light on too, just like he used to, back when I was a kid and afraid of the dark. Even though I wasn't living there anymore, he left it on. Then one Friday afternoon, I came out to the parking lot after school and found the truck dead. No lights. No sound. I hit the key again. Nothing. I could have called Dylan, I guess. But I didn't. I texted Greg. Truck won't start. No emoji. No please. 10 minutes later, he pulled up, still in his work shirt, sleeves rolled and stained at the collar. He didn't say hi, just opened the hood, leaned in, and said, "Try it again." The truck coughed twice before coming alive. "Loose terminal," he muttered, tightening something with his bare hand. Corrosion buildup. We stood there for a second, neither of us knowing what to say. The air smelled like pine needles and hot rubber. He wiped his hand on an old rag and looked around like he didn't know what to do with himself. I looked at him and said, "You still using that dinosaur flip phone?" His mouth twitched. "Only thing that survives getting dropped in a carburetor." I snorted. It wasn't much, but it was something. We stood there in that little bubble of not quite conversation, just two people who used to be something more. Then he nodded once, said, "You're good," and turned back to his truck. I watched him drive off. 2 days later, I sent a text. Something simple. Something halfway between a joke and a reach out. "Ever fix that lamp?" He didn't answer. No dots. No scene. Just silence. That was the last time I reached out. And the last time he showed up. I wasn't even supposed to be downtown that day. It was a random Saturday afternoon, and Dylan had dragged us to the artisan market near the square, hand-poured candles, kombucha tastings, all that fake quirky crap he loved. We'd just picked up a bag of lavender rosemary soap when I saw Greg. He was across the street, coming out of the hardware store with a box under his arm, still in his old boots, still in that navy work shirt with the frayed cuffs. My stomach dropped. Before I could duck away, Dylan noticed him too. "Oh hey," he said casually. "Is that your ex-stepdad?" He said it like he was pointing out a street performer. Greg spotted us right after. He hesitated for maybe a second, then kept walking toward us, slow, measured. I felt my jaw clench. Not because I didn't want to see him, but because I didn't know how to look him in the eye after everything. We met halfway, near the coffee stand. Mom tried to act surprised. "Oh, hi." Greg nodded once. "Liv." Then his eyes met mine. "Isaac." It wasn't warm or angry, just factual, like a weather report. I felt myself nod back. "Hey." Dylan stepped forward, all fake politeness and white teeth. "Hey man, I'm Dylan. Heard a lot about you." Greg looked him over. "Yeah." Dylan stuck his hand out. Greg didn't take it. The silence sat heavy between us. Shoppers walked past. Someone sneezed. A dog barked somewhere nearby. Then I opened my mouth and said the first thing that popped into my head. "You're just my mom's ex." The words came out flatter than I expected, but sharp, like a blade that had already drawn blood before anyone saw it coming. Greg didn't flinch. He just looked at me, really looked, and nodded once, like he was accepting the final result of an equation he'd already solved weeks ago. "Got it," he said quietly. He turned and walked away. That should have been it. I should have felt better. Powerful even. But instead, something knotted in my gut. Later that night, after Dylan left and Mom was in the kitchen making tea, I crept down the stairs and into the basement. Greg's old drawer was still there under the workbench. The one with the stiff runners that always got stuck halfway out. I pulled it open and dug through the clutter, old receipts, a broken tape measure, a crumpled can of WD-40. And then I found it. The adoption papers. I remembered when he first showed them to me back in 5th grade. "This means you're mine," on paper too. I held the packet in my hands, the edges soft with age. My name printed beside his. Greg Turner, legal guardian. I sat there for a minute, just staring at the page. Then I slipped it back into the envelope and sealed it shut. Greg hadn't cried, hadn't yelled. He just read the truth on my face and walked away. I think that's what got to me the most. That night, for the first time in weeks, I couldn't sleep. But I bet he did. You'd think breaking a family would come with some kind of noise. A slammed door. A screaming match. Something big enough to mark the moment. But in ours, it just sort of evaporated. No explosions. Just quiet. And pictures. Dylan had a drone. One of those sleek black ones with a camera that glides like a bird. He used it for everything: family hikes, Sunday brunch, even the time we drove out to some overlook in Tennessee, and he made Mom pose near the edge like she was doing a wellness ad. Mom hated heights, but she smiled anyway. She always smiled in the pictures. Every few days, she'd post a new one. Hiking with my boys. Family is everything. Or Saturdays are for blended love. The captions made me sick. Because if you looked close enough, you could see it. I wasn't smiling. In every photo, I was either looking away, or halfway blinking, or wearing that forced grin you give when you're praying for the moment to end. But nobody noticed. Not in the comments. Not in real life. They all saw Dylan and his stupid drone, Mom with her perfect curls, and me just the accessory that completed the image. Greg never liked social media, but I'm pretty sure he saw every post. He never liked or commented. Just watched. Then one day, I got a voicemail. Not from Greg. From Karen, this woman my mom used to work with back when she was managing that dental office. I barely remembered her, but she still had our home number, I guess. Her voice was low, fast. Isaac, honey, I didn't know who else to tell, but your mom's in some trouble. I overheard her on the phone today, something about legal papers and someone named Todd filing for visitation. That's your biological father, right? Just be careful, okay? I listened to it 3 times before it really clicked. Todd, my biological dad. The one who vanished before I could even say the word dad. The one with the old DUIs and the rehab stays. The one Mom used to whisper about like he was a ghost who might hear his name if she said it too loud. I didn't know how he'd come back into the picture. Or why. But I knew who wasn't mentioned in that voicemail. Greg. That night, I pulled the envelope out of Greg's drawer again. Same yellowing paper. Same signature at the bottom. The words felt heavier this time, like they'd been waiting in the dark just long enough. I didn't do anything with it. Not yet. But I laid it flat on my desk. No longer sealed. No longer buried. Greg hadn't said a word since I told him he was just my mom's ex hadn't shown up. Hadn't called. He was quiet, but not gone. And now, suddenly, Todd was back. Mom was panicking. Dylan was useless. And Greg? Greg had the one thing neither of them thought to worry about. Legal custody. I kept waiting for him to act. To post something. To show up in court and bang on the doors like in the movies. He didn't. But I knew he was watching. And that paper, his paper, was no longer just a reminder of some forgotten promise. It was leverage. It was proof. And it scared the hell out of them. Court didn't feel like the movies. There was no shouting. No gavel slamming. Just the sterile, buzzing silence, like the whole room was waiting to inhale. I sat on the left side with Mom and Dylan. Olivia and Dylan, I guess. I still couldn't say Mom around Greg in my head. It didn't feel right anymore. Across the aisle was Todd. He looked exactly like the stories. Red-eyed, twitchy, thin like someone who used to be stronger. His shirt was buttoned wrong. He kept rocking slightly in his chair, like a metronome no one could stop. The judge, an older woman with a silver bun and glasses that never left her face, called the session to order. It was just a preliminary hearing, but everything about it felt final. Cold. Decided. Olivia's lawyer stood first. A guy in a gray suit who looked like he practiced speeches in his mirror. He started talking about Todd's history, substance abuse, missing child support, a 2016 incident in Florida that was still flagged in the system. Todd didn't flinch. He just grinned. They're all lying. I've been alienated. This is parental alienation. He said that phrase at least 4 times. Parental alienation. Like it was his magic key to unlock the door back into my life. The judge didn't smile. She let him rant for a few minutes, then raised a hand. Mr. Sutton, please stay on topic. Then came the moment. Greg walked in through the back. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just calm. He was wearing clean jeans and a plain button-up shirt. He had a folder under one arm and no expression on his face. He didn't sit with anyone. He just slipped into the last row on the right, behind Todd, and folded his hands. I felt it before I saw it. Something shift. Todd glanced over his shoulder and scowled. "What's he doing here?" he muttered. The judge looked up. "Sir, are you on the case list today?" Greg stood. "I'm Greg Turner. I have a file to submit regarding legal guardianship." The judge raised her eyebrows. "Go ahead." He walked up, handed the envelope to the bailiff, and stepped back without a word. The lawyer, Mom's lawyer, flipped it open, and I saw her whole face go pale. She whispered something to Olivia. Olivia blinked fast, then turned toward me, like I'd had something to do with it. I hadn't said a thing. The judge skimmed the file, flipping pages like she already knew what she was going to find. Then she looked up at Olivia. "Ms. Walsh, were you aware that Mr. Turner holds a valid step-parent adoption certificate dated 2009? Olivia's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. I didn't think that was still active. The judge's tone sharpened. "It was never revoked. It remains on file and valid. As of now, Mr. Turner is the only legal parent with full guardianship rights over Isaac Turner." Silence. Pure, stunning silence. Todd's mouth fell open. "That's not fair," he spat. "I'm the biological father. That piece of paper don't mean anything." "It does," the judge interrupted firmly. "This court recognizes legal custody, not sentiment. Unless you are prepared to petition for full custody, this hearing is at risk of being dismissed in favor of the current guardian." Greg didn't even blink. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just stood there like a guy who knew how to fix something because he'd taken the time to understand how it was built in the first place. I didn't look at Olivia. I looked at him, and he looked at me, not like he was claiming anything, just reminding me. He never left. The courtroom smelled like air freshener and stress. The judge's voice echoed off the high ceiling as she read through the documents Greg had submitted. No one else spoke. Not Todd. Not Olivia. Not even her lawyer, who had started nervously tapping his pen against his notepad like he was itching to disappear. The judge cleared her throat and said the words that changed everything. "Based on the documentation provided, including the 2009 step-parent adoption certificate and the absence of any revocation or superseding custody agreement, this court recognizes Mr. Greg Turner as the sole legal guardian of Isaac Turner." The room didn't erupt. It just froze. Greg didn't flinch. He just nodded once, like he already knew what the judge would say. Because of course he did. He'd probably been waiting for this moment for months, quiet, patient, prepared. Olivia stood, face tight. "Your Honor," she said, trying to sound calm, with respect, "that adoption was symbolic. My ex-husband is not Isaac's real father." The judge looked over her glasses, deadpan. "Symbolic." Olivia hesitated. "I mean, it was meaningful, yes, but it wasn't meant to override my parental rights permanently. I didn't understand the legal implications." "You signed the papers," the judge said, "in front of a notary. You made it legally binding. This court cannot and will not dismiss that because it's now inconvenient." Dylan shifted next to her, tugging at the collar of his too-tight dress shirt. He hadn't said a word the entire hearing, and I wasn't sure if he was just nervous or regretting being here at all. Todd, for once, stayed quiet. He slouched deeper into his chair like a dog who knew he'd been kicked out of the yard for good. The judge turned to me. "Isaac," she said, her tone softer, "do you understand what this means?" I nodded slowly, my throat suddenly dry. "So Greg's still my legal dad?" Greg didn't move. Just looked at me, calm, steady, the same way he used to when I missed the bag at the gym or flubbed a math quiz. He answered without hesitation. "I never stepped down." That hit harder than anything else said that day. Not because it was dramatic, because it was true. Everyone else had either left, faded, or tried to rewrite the past. But Greg? He just stayed. Quiet. Unshakable. Like the beam holding up a crooked house. Olivia opened her mouth again, but the judge cut her off. "There's no further argument to be made here. Mr. Sutton's petition for visitation is denied based on instability and lack of prior involvement. Ms. Walsh, your legal standing in this matter is currently suspended pending review." Greg didn't even react. He wasn't here to win. He was here to stay. The judge closed the folder and looked out at the room. "Court is adjourned." The gavel tapped once, soft but final. Everyone started moving at once, shuffling papers, collecting bags, standing like they hadn't been just told their entire narrative had been rewritten. I stayed in my seat. Greg stayed too. For the first time in months, the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was solid. Olivia didn't look at me as she left. Todd muttered something I didn't catch and stormed out. But Greg? Greg just waited. Didn't ask for permission. Didn't need it. The hallway outside the courtroom was quiet, but tense, like the air was still holding its breath from what had just happened. People passed by, murmuring about other cases, lawyers flipping through folders, a kid crying somewhere near the clerk's office. I stood there for a second, unsure what to do. My backpack felt heavier than usual, even though I'd barely brought anything. I spotted Greg sitting on a bench across from the water fountain. He was hunched forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he was trying to read something invisible. He didn't see me yet. Then I heard her voice. Isaac. I turned. Mom, Olivia, was coming toward me, heels clicking too fast, Dylan trailing behind her like a shadow with nothing to say. Please wait, she said, her voice urgent and low. She looked wrecked. Her makeup was smudged around the edges. Her hair was falling flat. The confidence she always carried into every room, the carefully curated posture and crisp voice, was gone. Just listen, she said, grabbing my arm lightly. Don't go over there yet. I didn't say anything. Just looked at her hand until she let go. I know you're confused, she rushed on. But Greg doesn't know what he's doing. This isn't about you. He's just trying to eat. Trying to what? I asked. She blinked. Trying to hurt me. I almost laughed. By what, being in court? With a document you signed? Her mouth opened, then closed. Dylan shifted behind her but didn't speak. He waited. Isaac. He waited until the moment it would hurt me most. I looked at her. You mean the moment Todd showed up out of nowhere and tried to walk back into my life? That's not fair. No. I cut her off, voice low but firm. What's not fair is acting like Greg is doing this for revenge. He sat in the back. He didn't even speak until the judge asked him to. He's been quiet this whole time. You're the one who replaced him. Her eyes filled, and she reached for me again. Please, honey, I'm still your mother. I stepped back. Yeah, you are. But Greg's still my dad. I didn't wait for her response. Just turned and walked across the hallway toward the bench. Greg didn't look up until I was standing right in front of him. I sat down beside him, quiet. He glanced at me once, then looked back at the floor. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Are you? He didn't answer right away. Just shifted slightly and let out a breath. I've been thinking carefully, he said finally, like the words had been waiting their turn. About what happens next. About custody. About you. I stared ahead at the wall across from us. Beige. Scratched. Covered in old tape residue from signs that had been peeled off. Would you take it? I asked. If they offered you custody again? He turned his head just enough to look at me. Would you want that? I don't know, I said honestly. But I think you're the only one who never stopped showing up. Greg didn't smile. Didn't pat my shoulder or pull me into some dramatic hug. He just sat there beside me, steady as always. Mom called my name one more time from the hallway. I didn't look back. Not this time. They made us wait for over an hour before calling us back into the courtroom. By then, the hall was mostly empty. Olivia paced the floor in her heels, arms folded, lips pressed tight. Dylan sat in the corner pretending to scroll his phone, like if he stayed still enough, maybe no one would remember he was part of any of this. Greg didn't move from his bench. He hadn't looked at his watch once. I sat near the door, just staring at the exit sign, trying to imagine what the next hour would bring, trying not to think about the fact that no matter what the judge said, somebody in that room would feel like they lost. When they called us back in, the judge didn't waste time. This court has reviewed the evidence and testimony submitted over the course of this hearing. Effective immediately, the petition by Mr. Sutton for visitation is denied, citing long-standing absence, inconsistent behavior, and legal concerns. Todd wasn't in the room anymore. He'd left before the recess. No goodbye. No apology. It didn't surprise me. The judge continued. Due to the legal guardianship still active under Mr. Turner and the suspended standing of Ms. Walsh, the court is offering Mr. Turner temporary full custody of Isaac Turner, pending formal confirmation. The words hung there. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just firm. The gavel hadn't even dropped yet, but it felt final. Greg stood up slowly. I appreciate the court's confidence, he said, but I'll need to think it through carefully. That stunned everyone. Even the judge paused, pen frozen above the form. You're not accepting custody today? She asked. Greg shook his head once. I'm not rejecting it either. I just want to do right by Isaac, not rush it. That's all. A weird tension filled the room, like people weren't sure if that was wisdom or hesitation. But Greg? He wasn't shaken, just steady, measured, like always. The judge nodded. You have 48 hours to respond in writing. Understood, he said. I didn't look at Olivia, but I heard her exhale like someone had just punched the air out of her lungs. The session ended. People stood to leave. The bailiff opened the doors. I didn't move. Greg started toward the back exit. No big show. No dramatic look over his shoulder. He just walked like a man who didn't need to prove anything to anybody. And I sat there watching, not because I expected some grand gesture, but because I didn't. There was no celebration. No applause. Just certainty. In a room full of people pretending to be something, Greg had walked in, shown who he was, and walked out again. He didn't fight. He didn't plead. He outlasted them all. And for the first time, I realized that mattered more than anything. Court was over, but none of us moved. The room emptied out like water down a drain. Lawyers, clerks, the other families waiting for their cases. The kind of silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, like everyone had just realized something had broken, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Mom sat on one of the benches by the exit, shoulders curled inward like she was trying to fold herself into the wall. Her eyes were red. She kept dabbing at them with a tissue that had already lost its shape. Dylan stood behind her, rubbing her shoulder like it meant something. I didn't go to her. I walked toward the exit and spotted Greg by the parking lot, leaning against his old truck. He had his arms crossed and his keys dangling loosely from his fingers. That beat-up envelope, the one with the adoption papers, sat on the passenger seat, still unopened. He wasn't checking his phone, wasn't looking around, just waiting, the way he always did. I crossed the sidewalk without saying anything. Gravel crunched under my shoes. He didn't look up until I was a few feet away. "You really never left?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes. "You closed the door," he said. I waited. The words landed heavier than anything else that week. No lecture. No guilt. Just a simple truth. I nodded once, unsure what else to say. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what I wanted now. He just opened the truck door and climbed in like it was any other Tuesday. He didn't invite me in, and I didn't ask to go, but I watched him start the engine, watched the headlights flick on, watched that envelope sit there beside him, still sealed but glowing slightly in the sun like it already knew what it held. I thought maybe I'd cry, but I didn't. Instead, I felt something loosen in my chest, something I didn't even realize I'd been carrying for years. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure, but it was peace. He pulled out slow, careful, like he didn't want to make any sudden moves. I stood there on the curb, watching him drive down the road until his taillights disappeared behind a line of trees. I didn't wave. I just stood there, hands in my hoodie pocket, wind tugging at the back of my collar. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't wondering who was going to show up. I already knew. It had always been him. Quiet, steady, waiting, and maybe that was enough. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel and share your opinion about this story in the comments.